I'm Lynn.
I'm Amanda.
And this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We're cutting through the fluff and cracking open what it really takes to build a business and life that you actually want.
No gurus, no gatekeeping, just real talk, big action, and the badass energy you need to scale and slay.
Some episodes, it's just us.
And sometimes we bring on powerful guests with stories that'll hit home.
Either way, this is not about playing small.
It's about going all in.
Let's get after it. Hey there, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We have another incredible guest today. Chris Harris is a recognized authority on mindset and elite performance, helping leaders and sales teams in over 60 countries strengthen execution, discipline, and results. A best-selling author of 15 books, including the Book of Mindset, he teaches identity-driven frameworks that connect performance to purpose, elevate clarity for leaders, and drive measurable improvement in competitive environments. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And I love the name of your podcast, by the way.
Thank you. We love it too. And one of the things I love about, and I'm surprised it wasn't in your bio, but I know it's on your website, several places, from war rooms to boardrooms. I love that phrase.
Forbes actually came up with that. Forbes did an article on what I was doing, and they came up with that, and I stole it, and I've never stopped using it since.
Don't stop using it. I love it. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into questioning you.
Grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and my mother was a heroin addict and a heroin dealer. And so when I was 10 and my sisters were 11 and 12, we were all separated. And kind of from there, things got a little bit dicey. My mom went to prison, and my sisters and I never lived under the same roof again. But that was where I first really began to understand the importance of perspective, not just perception, but perspective. Lived with a lot of different foster families between then and until the time I graduated high school. For my 18th birthday, I was still in high school, but my gift to myself was I went and enlisted. I gave the oath and went into the military. So as soon as I graduated high school, went straight in the military, served for 4 years, got out, and then became a private contractor for just over 25 years, where I trained elite special forces around the world. After I did that for about 25 years, physically, I couldn't keep up with those 28-year-olds with 6% body fat. So I had to pivot. And I realized that all of the mindset and mental toughness and adversity and resilience stuff that I was teaching to our elite were very applicable in corporate America. And so I pivoted to corporate America. And I think since then I've done keynotes probably in about 60 countries. And so I'm really enjoying it.
Love that. Love that. It's a wild ride that you have had for sure. Do you feel like there was a defining moment where you realized that mindset wasn't optional?
Oh, yeah. I was probably 12 years old, right around that age. And I was really excited. I was homeless at the time. Now, by the way, I was homeless by choice. I was living with foster families, and whenever the weather would cooperate in Ohio, because there's certain times you did not want to be homeless in Ohio. But whenever the weather was, kind of turning nice, I would always leave these homes, and I would just go and just basically, I'd rather sleep under a bridge and to eat out of a dumpster than live with somebody who just didn't want you or were emotionally abusive. And so I was homeless by choice. I had scored this really cool bag of donuts out of the dumpster, and I was all excited because the donuts weren't damaged or destroyed, like they were still fresh and edible. And I remember sitting on the curb eating these donuts, and I was all excited about this big victory. And I just remember just having one of those moments that just really changes the trajectory of your life. And I'm like, what in the hell about this moment am I smiling about? Like, there's nothing to be grateful for here. You can do better than this. You're more than this. And if you begin to accept this as acceptable or normal, shame on you. And I just remember, I'm not eating another donut, throwing that crap back in the trash and standing up. And I was so resolute. They call them soul binding ties. And I remember as this 12 or 13-year-old kid just standing up and throwing the donuts away and said, oh no, I'm getting out of this. I am breaking this cycle of poverty, of rejection, of all of this stuff. And that was a very defining moment in my life.
It's interesting, like knowing this and reading everything that you do, but now knowing your background, it's not the same, but we actually have a lot of similarities of our past. And to hear that you were 12 years old where you're like, fuck this, like I see that I can be different. I'm not going to accept this. And I can actually remember that. Like I'm reliving it as you're saying it. And there were a couple of points in my life where I had that. And I was probably 14 when a really big one happened as well. And it's interesting how something from our childhood, like that particular moment, can make you completely change the trajectory of your life. Because I often say, like, my life could have been so different. Came from drug parents as well, alcoholics, got put into a group home, all of the other things, and like how different our lives could have been. But I've never looked back at the same time. And it's driven me to be who I am today. And obviously, with everything that you've accomplished and what you do today, you also wrap that into your dialogue and into your message today about that grit, that like mental stamina, that like clarity of moment, and embodying that to not look back and push forward, like in a good way.
Yeah, I learned very early in life that anytime I had a failure, I had a choice. Really, it was my decision. Is this going to be a bruise or a tattoo? And it's a bruise. It's always a bruise. But I remember, like, if you would have asked my two sisters, and both of them are deceased now because of just really hard living and really bad choices. They pursued my mother's footsteps, lifestyle, and chased the same demons. But anyway, both of them died young, or spent a lot of years in prison. But if you were to ask them, how did your lives turn out so horribly? They would have squared you in the eye, and I'm telling you, with all the passion and conviction of their faith, they would have said, well, that's easy. My mother was a drug dealer. If that same person would have turned to me and say, your life turned out really good. How did your life turn out so great, Chris? That's easy. My mother was a drug dealer. And so all of that taught me the power of perspective. Same exact circumstances during the same place and point in time. But, they chose an attitude of debt. Either I owe someone something or someone owes me something. I chose to look at it as an absolute advantage that I was going to have in life. I wouldn't want to compete against me with those experiences.
Nope, I feel you.
You are not your circumstances. I mean, yes, in that way it fueled you, but I think that's such a good lesson for anybody listening, for anybody who's been stuck in this mindset pattern, that you don't have to be that same old story, the sob story. You get to choose where you go. And these are common patterns where people feel stuck and they don't realize that they're the problem.
So,
amen. That's the ammunition.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So then you go into the military, you become a contractor. What was the moment where you're like, holy crap? Like, because I literally just had this conversation this weekend with a friend who's in the military, well, out of the military now, but what was that moment where you're like, what I teach here, what I do, what I believe can absolutely apply to corporate, to those outside of the military? What was that moment, and how did you make that transition?
Because I was surrounded with a lot of people who had a lot of success, and I'm going to use the term success lightly. I grew up thinking that if you got all four tires at the same time for your car, you were rich. Like I remember the first time I was able to get four tires at the same time. So my definition of success was a little skewed. I believe if you wore a Rolex or if you wore a suit to work, that you had attained some kind of success. But I learned as I got into corporate America that most people were just faking it. Most people really didn't have it figured out. They had the title, they had the income, they had the life, or at least the appearance of the life, but just mental weakness all the way across the board. They were still walking around, they were still dragging a wagon filled with all their idols, still filled with blame and excuses and all of these other things. Couldn't give them any feedback. And I'm like, how have these people made it so far? Like, how have they climbed, the food chain and to this level, and have attained this level of wealth or authority? And nobody had their shit together. And I just couldn't believe, I'm used to working with like Delta Force and Rangers and MARSOC and SEAL Team 6. I mean, when you think of mindset, when you think of mental toughness, I mean, they're the epitome of mental toughness. These guys were making $52,000 a year. And now I'm in corporate America and I'm dealing with people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year who couldn't compete with one of these guys in a real life scenario for probably 30 seconds. And I'm like, I've got like the map and the compass. And these people are willing to pay for it. And I'm like, sold.
Well, you're deemed the warrior mindset. And I love that you bring it in. I mean, Amanda and I, we are, we're definitely horses of a different color. In the now of what is, we believe in hustle culture in a very different way, not necessarily in the bastardized way that it is, and that mental toughness. And you talk about it, you teach it, you embody it. And so what do you feel is like the number one resistance that you get when you walk into a room and start talking about the warrior mindset, even if they're open to listen? Like, what's their
pushback?
Yeah.
Well, the first bit of pushback that I have is that most people have a very negative connotation to the word warrior. Mm-hmm. So they're like, is this guy going to try to make me combative? Is he going to kind of make me, always, speaking truth to power, speaking truth about power, the one that's the first to raise their hand in the room, difficult, challenging around every corner. And, so the first thing you have to do is you kind of got to get them to an open-bodied position by explaining, let me tell you what I mean by warrior maker. Like for me to make you into a warrior, let me tell you what I mean by that. And what I mean by is that, about 5% of your life is controlled by your analytical mind, your conscious mind. The other 95% is on autopilot, okay? And that is basically driven by stuff that's been there since probably you were 7 years old and you haven't dealt with. Everything from fear of loss to got something to prove, to chip on my shoulder, to irrational fear, to worry, to stress, all of these things, right? Unresolved trauma, not letting go and forgiving. These are your rivals. And when I don't call myself, I was given the moniker, the warrior maker over in Saudi Arabia. But what I'm really doing is I'm teaching you to go to war against those rivals that are really running about 95% of your operating system. And so once they understood what I meant by warrior, meaning basically going to war against the things that are preventing you from being the best version of yourself. And you can't do that until you first acknowledge them, right? And then you have to accept the fact that they are what they are. Doesn't matter where they came from. Let's just acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I'm a scared little boy, in corporate America making $300,000 a year, but I'm really a scared little boy, because I haven't dealt with whatever some guy said to me when I was 5, and he said, you're never going to amount to anything. So let's just call it what it is, right? Let's acknowledge it. Let's become aware of it. And then let's rip its freaking head off.
Good. I just want to reiterate for our audience, he's talking about going inward, looking at yourself first instead of pointing those fingers outward, which is, we preach this. We preach this. So, and you have a process that you go through that you call the warrior mindset, don't you? That you take them through?
Well, yeah, the warrior mindset, the warrior maker philosophy. But what I really call it, and I'm actually just finishing up an article right now on this, which will be published probably in a few weeks, but it's called the MetaQ. And that's kind of my own little proprietary name for something that's been around for a long time. There's nothing new under the sun. I haven't invented this. But basically, most people, if you were to walk into a room and you say, hey, raise your hand, walked into a room of leaders, executives, successful entrepreneurs, and you said, raise your hand if you understand the importance of mindset and mental toughness. Like everybody would raise their hand. Nobody denies that it's crucial to our evolving into the person we want to be. But then if you were to ask everyone in that room, all right, now I want you to be able to get a pen and paper and articulate. I want you to write out what is the difference between mindset, attitude, and beliefs. A lot of hands go down really fast. And so the very first thing I do is I explain to people what do I even mean by mindset? Because we can't even get aligned on what mindset really means. And so here's what I mean by mindset, okay? So our day is filled with this just myriad of stimulus. So the alarm clock goes off. That's a stimulus. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Stimulus. Somebody says something rude or disrespectful to you. Stimulus. Or condescending. Stimulus. All right. So the space that lives in our subconscious, because mindset does not live in our conscious mind. It lives in our subconscious, okay, which is outside our conscious mind, not beneath it, just outside it. And so mindset is mastering that space that lives between stimulus and how you either respond or react to it. And so when you see someone who's mentally tough, someone who's got a forward-thinking, positive, strong, grateful mindset, what you're really talking about, someone who has mastered the space between 1,000 stimuli a day and how they respond and or react to it. And when you master that space, you've got the right mindset. And that's what I teach people how to do.
What do you think the difference is between someone who says they want growth and someone who actually creates it?
Dreamers. I mean, just please be quiet so I can hear what you're saying. Show me.
I knew this was going to be great. So much our people. I mean, the action. I want to go back to your answer that you were talking about earlier, is that one thing that came up when you said that between the stimulus and like that gap.
Response.
Yep. The response is when you described the mental toughness, you said like going forward, open-minded, blah, 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 all of the things that you said. And I want to reiterate that he did not say closed off, because a lot of times people think that toughness is that closed offness. And you actually, like, what we know about you, reading your websites and your bios and all of the things you teach people, and you even just said it, like doing that recognition of, okay, you're a scared little boy. There is this vulnerability and this openness to it that you at least have to have with yourself to be able to work through the process. And there's not this closed offness, because a lot of times people equate, especially those, if they're looking at somebody who's come from the military, that could be a bit more like hard, but closed off hard, versus a vulnerable kind of like, I've done the work, I understand the inner, I'm going to do outward, right? I love that you did not say closed off and that you actually talk about the adverse, because in my opinion, that is super important. And we talked a little bit about our past, and it was definitely something I had to really work through, because it was a protection or and a lot of times we do these things like that scared little boy is still that way. And they might not recognize where it's coming from, because it was a protection, a survival mechanism that maybe got put into place that they didn't unravel and heal, or whatever the terminology that was, but that you are getting them to recognize, to be open and flow, to recognize, open and flow. And then this gives them the ability to be able to lead better, to be able to live through adversity, have more agility, and navigate things, which I think is super important.
Yeah, that's really tough. It's really tough when you're trying to train warriors or make warriors, as in the sense of how I described it, basically teaching people to go to war with their inner rivals and to master them, right? Put them to work. Ride those rivals. I mean, literally put a saddle on them and have the reins in one hand and a whip in the other when you need it. But master those rivals. Put them to work. Leverage them. Figure out a way to monetize them. But stop sitting around whining about them. Like, I don't want to hear that. And, but the biggest rival for men, it's different than for women. This is just in my own professional experience. But for men, the biggest rival, and I've trained a lot of warriors in a lot of locations around the world, and I can tell you it's usually their ego. Not always, but that's definitely one of the top 2 or 3 with men. And then for women, I have found in my non-licensed experience, I am not a therapist, okay? I'm not a clinical whatever, but with women, it's usually irrational fear. And by irrational, I mean fear that really it either has a low probability of actually happening, right? That would make it irrational, or it has an actual probability of happening, but you're not doing anything to change the outcome. Well, it might as well be an irrational fear, because if you're just going to sit around and let it live rent free, and fear is supposed to motivate us to take action. All right. And if we're not going to let it motivate us to take action and to potentially have an impact on the outcome, change the outcome, it might as well be an irrational fear. So with men, I'm usually having to start kind of with that ego. And with women, I'm kind of having to start the conversation with irrational fear. Now, that's not a broad generalization. That's just my own personal experience.
I get it.
Why do you think there is that difference? I mean, I can make my own assumptions, but in your professional experience, why do you feel like that's the defining moment for?
Because culturally, we're given different scoops of bullshit growing up. So, as a boy growing up in Midwest America, the bullshit that I was given was, men don't cry. Real men don't cry. My wife, who grew up we've been just celebrated our 30th anniversary, but, she grew up in East Texas. She was raised under the theory of, you need to learn to cook, you need to learn to clean. Why are you learning how to balance a checkbook? That's your husband's job, So, look, we both were fed our daily rations of bullshit, and they were different, but they were both lies.
Okay. So do you feel like, to thinking about the daily ration that we get now, so we all grew up with our own shit. We all have our own background and past to deal with. So what do you feel like is a daily habit people can do now to create the biggest shift over time when it comes to mindset, when it comes to this warrior mentality? What's that shift that they can make now?
Oh, in my opinion, hands down, it's mastering the art or the science of, however you want to view it, metacognition. I truly believe that metacognition, in my opinion, I did a lot of research for this last book I just wrote, that just came out, the Book of Mindset. There's years of research into, the 48,000 words or whatever that book is. But I can tell you that based on what I have learned on that journey of writing that book, which was a very challenging book to write, I truly believe that metacognition is the highest form of human intelligence. That's my opinion. All right. And if anybody wants to challenge me on that, send me your white papers, your case studies. I'd love to read it. But metacognition goes way above and beyond awareness. Okay. You got awareness, and then you got metacognition. And metacognition is basically this constant state of just being aware of or thinking about your thinking. That's what metacognition is. It's thinking about what you're thinking. So look, if 95% of our lives, from the time we get up to the time we go to bed, if 95% of that is on autopilot, is automated, which, right down to right now, you're blinking, you're inhaling, you're exhaling. You're holding your bladder. All of this stuff is done on autopilot. And so the only way you're ever going to change or improve anything in your life is you're going to have to get into the subconscious level. But that's not how we try to change it. We try to change it in the analytical. Well, one of the reasons we try to change it in the analytical, because it's quick. It's the shortcut. It's an easy hack, but it never lasts. It's like eating cotton candy at the county fair. It has about that level of nutritional value. But if you really want to make lasting change and you want to make it now, you've got to get to the subconscious level. The problem is the subconscious level has a bodyguard standing at the gate. Okay. And I call him Critical Carl. And just imagine this 7-foot, 400-pound, muscle-bound firewall that's standing there, who's not going to let anything into the subconscious that it perceives as a threat. All right. And if you don't know how to get past Critical Carl, you're never getting into the subconscious mind. And if you don't get in the subconscious mind, you may join the gym on January 2nd, but you're quitting by Valentine's Day.
Thanks for breaking that down. And we do talk a lot about it, but I don't know if we've ever used the term metacognition I don't think so. Definitely going to be talking more about that.
You're disrupting your automation. When you think about what you're thinking, what you're doing is you're breaking the automation.
Yeah, I love this. We talk about it a lot in emotional intelligence and psychological safety. In that world, we talk a lot about it. But again, maybe we did use that term, but it's not sticking right now. But I love how you talk about it. And it kind of couples with epigenetics, which is a different part of our disruption of things. It's more on the DNA or the DNA side versus the mental side. But it is getting you to look at how the process works and being in control of the process and not just the outcome. Essentially, it's not just being in control of the thinking. It is you're looking at how the thinking is happening and disrupting and reprogramming yourself. Essentially, you're creating new neural pathways to be able to create, if you're putting in the work, to create different response mechanisms and patterns.
Cause and effect, unintended consequences. Absolutely. And if you take a look at emotional intelligence, and Harvard School of Business said this many years ago, they said the number one predictor of our professional career success is our EI, our emotional intelligence. And if you take a look at emotional intelligence as a whole, it's broken down into 5 pillars. So we got self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, empathy, and social skills. And any one of those can be improved. All right. We can improve any one of those 5 pillars with a little bit of work and effort and all of this. But in order to improve any one of those 5 pillars, every one of them takes metacognition. There's no way around it.
Yeah, well, and if you focus on the metacognition side, again, using that term now, you have more impact in the change that you're making, because essentially you're having people go beyond the surface, which is typical mindset stuff. Like, how are you thinking? What are you thinking? How are you going to reprogram? Even going into the kind of the root of that belief or whatnot, but you're getting them to look at like, okay, like, why are you thinking this? What is the mechanism behind it? You have more impact with the work that you're doing because you're going below the surface.
You're uploading new information, and you're right. You're creating new neural pathways. You're basically uploading information into the central nervous system. You're creating new instinctive, automatic, involuntary reactions. That's what I did for 25 years. When I taught close quarters combat to these Tier 1 special forces, this is what made my kind of claim to fame. This is why I could charge twice as much as my competitors and still win the deal, because everybody else was teaching based on muscle memory. And I was the guy that came in and said, wait a minute, screw muscle memory. You don't have months to work with these operators, especially if it's mission specific. You have hours or days. And so I came in and I would just say, look, I'm going to upload new instinctive, automatic, involuntary reactions based specifically on the mission they're about to go on. And once I understood how you could create a new instinctive automatic reaction, which is called a reflex arc. So look, there's only 12 ways somebody can hurt you with their bare hands. Okay. There's 12 ways. All right. They can choke, they can throw a straight, an uppercut, a hook, they can grab, they can tackle, they can push, they can whatever. There's 12. And so what I would do is I would just go in, and within a matter of hours or days, if I had days, I would create a new reaction to each one of those 12 possible stimuli. And once I understood how to create, and basically I was just creating new neural pathways. And if you think about, everybody has a dominant learning style, right? Some of us, it's touch, some of it, it's audible, some of it, it's visual, but we all have these different learning styles that are dominant to us, okay? And what you do, if you want to create a new neural pathway very quickly, that when I'm transferring this new information to you, let's say it's an outward block, okay? Then what I would do is I would make sure that as I'm teaching you that outward block, I don't want it to be muscle memory. What I would make sure is that I transferred that information on that outward block by giving a little bit of audible, a little bit of visual, a little bit of kinesthetic, and a little bit of emotional-based learning. And when you compile all of them together, all of a sudden, anybody ever comes toward that side of their body, instinctively, that outward block is there. 30 years down the road, no practice. And so I really spent 25 years just creating new neural pathways. And when I learned that you could do that, teaching people to get over their bullshit, I found a lot of success in it.
Getting over your bullshit, taking ownership for it. I think it's all along that same lines that people are always waiting for clarity. They're waiting for motivation. They're waiting for the right time. They're waiting for the right circumstances. But it is about ownership. It is about taking control of your own mind. And because we all know how powerful the mind can be, how it overrides so much of our lives. And so you have to take ownership of that, and recognizing what's keeping you stuck, recognizing what's holding you back, and that you have the power to change things.
Amanda, I would challenge any listener to your podcast with this. Until you take ownership of your bullshit, I don't think it's possible for you to get over it.
Agreed.
I don't know how you can truly get over something you haven't owned.
Agreed.
Amen.
We 100% agree with that. I preach it. I wrote a book on it. My personal book is around that. So I love everything that you just said. And essentially, going into the corporate world, that instinctive reprogramming with a new instinctive response. You said reaction, but I think because of you're doing it with neural pathways, it's an instinctive response. It's not something that, I guess it would be a reaction as well because it's trained, but it's also a response because you've reprogrammed your brain to know that that's the way to go. And if we can do that in the corporate world, can only imagine the beasts.
So when you teach close quarters combat, especially what I taught, which was barehanded finishes and disabling the central nervous system and all kinds of things, weapons of opportunity. But for me, everything that we taught was built around a Department of Defense term that came from the 50s, all right? We used it to actually train fighter pilots who were going to be in dogfights. And it's called the OODA loop, OODA. And OODA stands for you observe, you orientate, you decide, and you act. All right. And we eventually learned that those same principles we were teaching to military pilots, we could actually teach in close quarters combat. And how you knew that you were really training like an elite warrior who's going to be in the 1% of 1% of elite warriors, and someone you never wanted to go near with an angry intent with your bare hands because you were going to be in the dirt and you're going to be hurting. And so the ones that you knew that really evolved to expert level were the ones who could strip that OODA loop of its middle two letters. All right. So there was no more observe, orientate, decide, and act. The real badasses were the ones who just observed and acted, period. Yeah. They don't have to think about it. Second nature. It's like that doctor hitting you in the knee with a little green hammer. You're kicking.
I can see it. I love this conversation. I know we're stretching it. Amanda, do you have any questions before we start closing up?
I was just smiling because like when you find your people, you're like, yeah, these are my people. These are the people who are speaking our language. This is the stuff that, I mean, I know that now I'm going to go down this metacognitive like rabbit hole later, and all the books that my phone's probably going to blow up with all the things I need to read, which I'm very excited for. So, what is one thing that you want to leave our audience with? If they could, one last thing, what do you want to leave our audience with?
I'm going to leave them with two. And one, I'm going to teach you how to master metacognition in a very short period of time. I'll give you a 30-second, here, if you want to become excellent at metacognition, here's how you do it. I'm going to leave you with two quotes. One is by Alan Watts, 1970s British philosopher, but he said this. He said, "You are under no obligation to be the same version of yourself you were 5 minutes ago." Love that. The second quote I want to leave you with is with Carl Jung, all right, famous psychologist. But he said, "Until you make your subconscious mind conscious, it will continue to control your life and you will call it fate." All right, and then now I'm going to teach you metacognition. I have a method I call the meta-cue method. All you do is you pick a cue. Your cue that you pick, it can be whatever you want. It can be sitting, standing, opening, closing. So you say, all right, or looking at your phone. Like the average person looks at their phone like 100 times a day, okay? So you choose whatever cue you want. All right, so every time I sit, every time I open a door, every time I close a drawer, it doesn't matter. Every time I walk through a doorway, every time I take a drink of a beverage, all right, that's your cue. I am going to stop for a brief moment. I'm going to think about what I am thinking at that exact moment in time. And now what you're doing is, because you'll know when that cue, if you say my cue is every time I sit or stand, or every time I sit, stand, walk through a doorway, anytime I open, close, whatever you want it to be. Anytime I say, okay, whatever it is, but it needs to be something that you're aware that you did it, then I'm going to stop right now and I'm going to, just for a brief moment, what am I thinking? And what happens is you're training, it's like cardio. It's like metacognition cardio. And then after about 3 or 4 days of that, you're going to be mentally exhausted. I can't believe I have interrupted and disrupted my automation this many times today. I am exhausted. Over.
We're definitely going to be doing that, Amanda. It's going to be on we're going to have a competition around it. Thank you. I'm excited to actually do that. That's something I've never done. I love things that I've never done to be able to try. And it's something, very excited. Chris, this has been incredible. We have a lot of great people on our podcast, but I love what you're doing. I love how you're taking what you know, how you've been, like what you believe, and like you have adapted that into a world, to me, that we need more of in today's world. Just talking about the softness and the lack of accountability and different things that unfortunately are more the norm than not nowadays. And I love what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And where can people connect with you, learn from you, go deeper into your work?
TheWarriorMaker.com. Or just Google The Warrior Maker.
Of course, that will be in our show notes, but it's memorable enough. Go ahead and Google search it right now. If this episode hit for you, if you saw yourself in this conversation or somebody else, share it. Send it to someone who needs the same wake-up call that you got today.
Yes. And we want to hear about your metacognition interruption for learning how to look at how you think, what you're thinking at that time, not just the thought that comes to mind. So drop it in the comments below, your experience as well. We want to know who else is going on this journey with us to stop and think with one of our, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. Sit, stand, look at my phone, but we want to know. Let us know. Make sure that you're following Chris. Let him know what you took away from this podcast. And until next time, our badasses,
get after it.
Thanks for tuning in. But remember, listening is not doing.
Take what you heard today and move.
Share the episode, leave us a review, and tag us when you take action.
Head over to thepursuitofbadasserie.com and see how we're helping entrepreneurs get results without the fluff.
Until next time,
let's get after it.